The housing crisis is reversing. 4 consecutive years of improving affordability, and almost nobody is talking about it. The reason for this, it doesn't fit the narrative. Houses are too expensive, young people can never buy, and it's never been a worse time to buy property. That's the story most people push, because it's what gets clicks, and it makes people feel validated. But when you actually look at the data, the ratio of house prices to earnings has been falling since 2022, and wages have outpaced house prices every single year for 4 years. Mortgage rates are down from their peak, and 91% of local authorities in England saw affordability improve last year. So why does everyone still think this is getting worse? And more importantly, what does this actually mean for investors like me and you? Well, that's what I'm going to break down in today's video. Hi guys, I'm Jim Holland from Dan and Jim Property, which I run with my brother in the northwest of England. We buy houses and rent them out either as whole properties or by the room. And I've just completed my first HMO conversion, transforming a 3-bed house into a 6-bedroom property, and raised £160,000 in private investor funds to make it happen. Right now, I'm focused on filling my pipeline with 3 to 5 projects over the next 12 months. My bigger vision is to create freedom for myself and others through property, whilst providing high quality housing that people are actually proud to call their home. If you're new here, please subscribe to the channel. I break down the data and trends shaping UK property so you can make smarter investment decisions. In this video, I'm going to show you what affordability actually means and why raw house prices are misleading, the 4-year data that proves the crisis is reversing, but why still people can't afford to buy even though it's more affordable, and how this creates massive opportunity for investors who know how to take advantage. But more on that later. Right, let's get into the basics. When you turn the news on and see headlines like house prices hit records high, normally most people think that's bad because it's unaffordable, there's a crisis, and it's a disaster. But here's the thing, raw house prices don't tell you anything about affordability. Say you earn £35,000 a year, and the average house in Manchester costs £250,000. That's a ratio of 7.1 times your salary. Now let's say 5 years later, the same house costs £300,000. Sounds worse, right? Prices went up. But what happens if your salary also went up to £50,000? Now the ratio is 6 times your salary. The house got more expensive, but it's actually more affordable. This is why the metric that matters the most is house price to income ratio, not the raw house price, the ratio. How many years of salary does it take to buy an average house? Lower number equals more affordable, higher number equals less affordable. And that ratio, it's been falling for 4 straight years. Now, let me show you something which is going to absolutely twist your melon. Let's compare London to the Northwest. In 2015, the average London house cost £400,000 and the average London salary was £35,000. That's a ratio of 11.4 times earning. Today, the London average is £530, but the average salary is now £45. The ratio is 11.8. London got less affordable over the last decade. Now let's look at the Northwest. In 2015, the average house was £130,000 and the average salary was £25,000 with a ratio of 5.2. Today the average house is £210 and the average salary is £35 with a ratio of 6. Yes, Northwest prices went up 61% in a decade, but the ratio only moved from 5.2 to 6. Still far more affordable than London. And crucially, for the last 4 years, wages have been catching up faster than prices, and that's the trend nobody's talking about. So let's look at what's actually happened since 2022, because that was the peak, and that's the worst it got. The house price to income ratio in England in 2022 was 9.5. That was the peak. 2023, 8.9, slight improvement. 2024, 8.3, carry on getting better, and 2025, 8.2, and it's still improving. 4 consecutive years of that ratio falling. 4 years of affordability getting better, not worse. And this isn't some quirk, there's a clear reason for this. Wages have been growing faster than house prices every single year. And here's the breakdown. House price growth in 2023 was 1.3%, 24 1.5, and 2025 1.1. Basically flat, and it's hardly moving. Whereas wage growth, 2023, 6 to 7%, 24, 5 to 6, and 2025, another 5 to 6. Every year, wages are outpacing house prices by 4 to 5 percentage points. Compound that over 4 years, and that's pretty significant. And it's not just wages. Mortgage rates peaked at 5.08% in 2024. They're down to 4.33, and base rate has fallen from 5.2 to 3.75%. And 91% of local authorities in England saw affordability improve between 23 and 24. 91%. That isn't an anomaly, it's a trend. But here's where it gets interesting for investors. If affordability is improving, if it's generally getting easier to buy, why aren't more people buying? Why is rental demand still at record highs? And why is there still 21 applications for every rental property according to Zoopla? Because affordability doesn't mean accessibility. And that's the tension that creates opportunity. Now let me show you the real barrier, because it's not the monthly mortgage payment. It's actually getting through the door. Let's say you earn £35,000 a year. That's about £2,400 a month take home. A £200,000 house at 4.5% interest rate over 25 years is roughly £1,100 per month on your mortgage. But the average rent in Manchester is £1,324 per month. So the mortgage is actually cheaper than the rent, which most people find crazy. So why can't they buy? Because to get a mortgage, you need a deposit. At 10% loan to value, that's £20,000 you need to put down. And when you're paying £1,324 in rent every month, plus bills, plus actually living, saving 20 grand is going to take you years. And this is the trap. The monthly payment is affordable, but getting through the door isn't. And crucially, the data backs this up. Lloyds Banking Group surveyed people aged between 25 to 34 who couldn't afford to buy. 67% cited the deposit as the main barrier, and only 41% said they couldn't afford the mortgage payments. So let's think about that. The majority of people who can't buy could actually afford the mortgage payments. They just can't save up the lump sum to get started. And it gets worse. The average time to save for a deposit is now 7.5 years. But during those 7.5 years, rents keep going up. 44% of renters see the deposit as their biggest barrier to buying, and it's a cycle they can't escape. And then there's the supply side of the equation. The government's target of 1.5 million new homes by 2025, Savills forecast 840,000 are going to be built. That's 42% short of the target. 2025 and 2026 are expected to hit a 12-year low for new home completions. The supply crisis isn't getting any better. It's pretty structural. So you've got affordability improving in real terms, but deposit pots locking people out, and not enough houses being built to meet demand. So that's a recipe for permanent rental demand. Which brings us to, what does all this mean for investors like me and you? Here's the opportunity most people are missing. The rent is trapped by the deposit barrier. These aren't low quality tenants. These are people who could afford to buy. They just can't access the market. They're employed, they're professional, and normally they're pretty reliable. They're paying £1,300 a month in rent because they can't save a £20,000 deposit. For HMO operators, this is the ideal tenant profile. Someone who wants simplicity, one monthly payment, bills included, and everything handled. They're not necessarily looking for the cheapest room. They're looking for quality and convenience. And if you're thinking about where to deploy capital, the Northwest is the sweet spot right now. The house price to income ratio in the Northwest is 6, and the national average is 8.14. That's 25% more affordable than the rest of England. And average house prices in Liverpool are 181,000, Manchester 250,000. Compare that to the national average of 256,000, or London to 530. But here's what makes this interesting. The Northwest has delivered the highest house price growth of any region over the last decade. 61% increase since 2015. Liverpool specifically 72.6%. So you've got a lower entry price than the national average and more affordable ratio for local buyers, which means more sustainable tenant demand and the strongest growth track record of any region, and rental yields of 6 to 8% versus London's 4.5%. The crisis narrative says it's never been worse. The data says affordability has improved for 4 consecutive years, but structural barriers, deposits, and supply mean rental demand isn't going anywhere. For professional operators in the right locations, this is a genuinely strong market. Earlier I mentioned this creates a massive opportunity for investors who know how to take advantage. And this is what I mean. Permanent rental demand. Quality tenants who could afford to buy but can't. And a region with the best affordability and the strongest growth. But most investors hear this and think, great, but I don't have time to manage properties. Finding deals, managing conversions, handling tenants, and dealing with all the compliance. I get it, it's a lot. And that's exactly why we built our partnership model. If you're sitting on capital, whether that's 500,000 all the way up to 5 million, and you want exposure to HMO returns without the operational headache, that's what we do. You provide the capital and we handle everything else. Every phase, every professional, every tenant relationship. And then we do a 50-50 profit split. There's a link in the description to our investor waitlist. We ask about capital available and your timelines. If that's for you, the link's below. So let's bring this all together. The housing crisis narrative says things are getting worse, whereas the data says affordability has been improving since 2022. 4 consecutive years of wages outpacing house price growth. Mortgage rates have fallen from their peak, and 91% of local authorities have seen improvements in affordability. But structural barriers remain. Deposits locking out buyers who could afford the payments, and supply falling 42% short of government targets, and a 12-year low in new home completions. The result, a generation of renters who could buy but can't access the market, which means permanent rental demand. And for professional operators in affordable, high-growth regions like the Northwest, this is exactly the environment you want to be developing capital into. So in this video, we covered why affordability is improving and what this means for rental demand. But that's just one of the 10 reasons why 2026 is shaping up to be the best entry point into property in decades. And in this video, I break down all 10. The landlord exodus, why interest rates have peaked, how private equity is validating the market, the regulatory changes which is professionalizing the industry, and why a generation of permanent renters means demand isn't going anywhere. So if you found this useful but want the full picture, check out that video and I'll see you there.